It was a pleasure to burn. It was a special pleasure to see things eaten, to see things blackened and changed. With a brass nozzle in his fists, with its great python spitting its venomous kerosene upon the world, the blood pounded in his head, and his hands were the hands of some amazing conductor playing all the symphonies of blazing and burning to bring down the tatters and charcoal ruins of history. With his symbolic helmet numbered 451 on his starred head, and his eyes all orange flame with the thought of what came next, he flicked the igniter and the house jumped up in a gorging fire that burned the evening sky red and yellow and black. He strode in a swarm of fireflies. He wanted above all, like the old joke, to shove a marshmallow on a stick in the furnace, while the flapping pigeon-winged books died on the porch and lawn of the house. While the books went up in sparkling whirls and blew away on a wind turned dark with burning. That is how Ray Bрэdberi's Fahrenheit 451 starts.
Dear friends, Fahrenheit 451. Today we're going to discuss this wonderful book to celebrate the bicentenary of Ray Bрэdberi, the outstanding American writer. And let me introduce our guest today, Duglas Rouz, the management officer of the U.S. Consulate, Vladivostok, who will be leading our discussion today. And also, let me introduce our colleagues from the Center of the English Literature of Novosibirsk Regional Library, Larisa Swirидova. And also let me introduce the active participants of today's discussion, the students of the Faculty of Foreign Languages, Novosibirsk State Pedagogical University, and members of the club Enjoy Literature. And finally, let me introduce myself. I am the leader of this club and the associate professor of the Faculty of Foreign Languages. So now let me give the floor to Duglas Rouz.
Thank you very much, Anna. I'm very glad of this opportunity to meet with you here today. I have been in Russia for over 2 years now. I arrived to Vladivostok in September of 2018. And all of the American officers who had been working in Vladivostok were relocated temporarily to Moscow in March of this year, earlier, due to the COVID situation. And so we are waiting patiently for our consulate in Vladivostok to reopen. So while we're waiting, I'm glad that I can have this opportunity, which I would not have had. I have not visited Novosibirsk. I hope that sometime in the future, I will have an opportunity to visit your city. So thank you. So let's start with just a little bit about the author. Let me ask, would someone like to raise their hand and volunteer anything they have learned about Ray Bрэdberi, the author, that they'd like to mention?
Kate, we are welcome.
Okay. Well, author Douglas Bрэdberi was born on August 22nd in 1920 in Illinois. And as a child, his family moved to California. And there is the interesting fact I want to share with you. Well, actually, Bрэdberi's writing life was sparked by an encounter with a carnival magician, Mr. Electrico, in 1932. At the end of Electrico's performance, he reached out to the 12-year-old Bрэdberi, touched him with his energy-charged sword, and commanded, "Live forever." And Bрэdberi later said, "I decided that was the great idea I had ever heard." And he just started to write without stopping. He decided that if he becomes a writer, he will live forever. Well, as I said, his family moved to California in 1934, and as a teenager, he participated in his school's drama club and occasionally befriended Hollywood celebrities. After graduation from high school in 1935, 1938, Bradbury couldn't afford to go to college, so he went to the library. And he said, "Libraries raised me. I believe in libraries because most students don't have any money. When I graduated from high school, it was during the Depression and we had no money. I couldn't go to college, so I went to the library 3 days a week for 10 years. And Bradbury sold his first professional piece, the story Pendulum, in November 1941, just a month before the United States entered the Second World War. About his wife, Maggie. This is also an interesting fact. I'm sure you will be happy to hear this information. Bradbury first met Maggie McClure, the woman who was to become his wife, in downtown LA's bookstore, and she worked there. She couldn't take her eyes off him, though not because of instant attraction. She thought he was going to steal something, which of course he did. He stole her heart. Well, Fahrenheit 451 is surely the most popular and the most well-known novel in his career, I can say. He first wrote his tale as a short story called Bright Phoenix in 1947. And the work progressed to adolescence as a novella called The Fireman, and finally became a full-grown novel in 1953. And this was Bradbury's first big important serious work, though he was already famous for science fiction stories like his 1950 collection, The Martian Chronicles. And these stories put Bradbury on the map, but Fahrenheit 451 got his name on the literary A-list.
Let's take a pause a minute, and I'll point out a couple of things that I think were very important in what you said. You mentioned the fact that he considered himself raised in libraries, in the library, and so I think from that perspective you understand why books were so important to Ray Bradbury, and so it gives another depth of meaning to this book, Fahrenheit 451, a book that talks about the burning of books. And so these books were something that were his friends and his educators growing up. So I think that for him to depict the burning of books is very significant for him. And you also pointed out that the time that he was writing this book, he obviously was one of these people who wanted to be a writer and was successful. He was a writer from a young age and wrote his entire life. And so he was not one of these people like, he was not like a Chekhov who was a doctor but also wrote. You know, he didn't have a main career and wrote on the side. Ray Bradbury was a writer. That's who he was. And this time that he was writing this book is the period after World War II is finished, and the period that is sliding into the beginnings of what we call the Cold War. And so would anyone like to maybe give someone else a chance to comment on what they think the period in which he is writing this, how did that impact this story? What effect did it have on this story?
Anne?
Period was really really difficult in what so it was period of anti-intellectualism, and so also there was such a phenomenon as McCarthy period. So, and this political climate is characterized by xenophobia, so fear of people from other countries, and censorship. So, and Fahrenheit 451 is kind of a protest, so against editors. But ironically, this novel 451 was edited many times. That is really interesting. That was really interesting to know for me. And so Рэя Bрэдбeri's biography is really rich. And I liked his words about that person should do what he loves and love what he does. These are good words that people should consider when they live their life. Also, I don't know whether it's tolerant to compare Рэя Брэдбери with an alien, because this person is extraordinary. It goes without saying that he's extraordinary. And he said it wasn't he who wrote his books. Characters came to him, and he just wrote down their words. So he didn't consider himself the main personality in this process. He wasn't the captain. And he also said that he asked his characters about anything, and characters replied to him. And so he also mentioned that every book is a person, and when we read some books, we put on the eyes of the author and look using the author's eyes. And that was really captivating and so unusual to realize.
Very good. Thank you very much. Yes, it's interesting to hear about a writer's perspective of their process. The fact that he perceived it as these books came to him, or these characters came to him and told him the story. That's an interesting way to imagine the book unfolding and the process of writing unfolding. Some points you brought up about the period in which he was writing. One you mentioned was the anti-intellectualism. It's interesting that I think if you look at American history over the broad course of American history since the beginning of the colonial times, you'll see that there has always been a streak of anti-intellectualism within American society, and there's always a struggle between people that consider themselves as just sort of having common sense, and they don't need what they call book learning, and then they have a negative opinion of people that are too smart or too intellectual. I think you can find that in almost any period, but it was certainly one that was also prevalent in the period in which he was writing. There was a man who ran for president by the name of Adlai Stevenson, who was harshly criticized for being the term a pointy-headed professor or too intellectual, that when he would make speeches or write, he would use words that maybe the common person wouldn't understand, a higher level of vocabulary. And so you saw this within the highest levels of American politics, that you couldn't demonstrate yourself to be too smart or too intelligent, or people would have a negative opinion of you. And McCarthyism was mentioned. This man, Eugene McCarthy, was a member of Congress out of the state of Wisconsin. And if you're not familiar with what McCarthyism was, it was this man that launched a campaign to find out or to discover what he thought were communists within the government and communists within every part of American society that were trying to disrupt American society. And he really ruined a lot of people's lives through that process. And it took a fair amount of time for people to stand up to him and just really point out how he was unfairly criticizing quite a number of people, and really making life life very hard for a number of people unfairly. And so it's kind of a black mark within our American history that that kind of activity went on at that time. One of the elements within the book, Fahrenheit 451, that I think also relates to this beginning of the Cold War period is within the book, you'll see elements where the war is mentioned throughout the book. There's this war that's just in the background. I mean, it's really not very prevalent within the action of what's going on, but you'll see mention of, you'll hear from the early part of the book, you'll hear them, or you'll read them talking about the bombers and the planes that are going overhead. And I think that is somewhat an element that relates to the Cold War period, in that in the early 1950s, there was a real fear of a war with the Soviet Union. And so people had a real fear that just at any day bombs could come over and wipe everyone out. But yet it wasn't really affecting your day-to-day life. So the fact that this threat of war was something that's not really tangible, but is just in the background and always kind of present there, but not something that people were involved in day to day. Okay, let's go on a little bit from talking about Рэя Брэдбери in the time and talk about this concept of this novel being what could be classified as a dystopian novel. Would someone like to volunteer what they would say is a definition of what a dystopian novel is?
Christina, you're welcome. Oh, okay. And Christina and Maxim. Well, Christina, you can start. Yeah.
Yes, I want to say that dystopia is some type of in literature or in movies that it's an image of the future, but it's future we can't see, and we don't want to see. It's like a very dark future, maybe unwanted future, and this image of this future we can see in Рэя Брэдбeri's dystopia, in Рэя Брэдбeri's books in general, actually, because he liked to write some books like that. I know.
Thank you.
Maxim?
Well, also I wanted to add that a dystopia is an imagined community or society that is dehumanizing and frightening. And a dystopia is an antonym of a utopia, which is a perfect society. And also I wanted to say about the central themes of dystopian novels, and they are government control, environmental destruction, technological control, survival, and loss of individualism.
Great, thank you very much.
Natasha?
Oh, we have more? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think there, yeah.
Okay, I have some notes about the dystopia too. As Maxim noted, there are some features of the genre of literature, but of course, for me, the most important is the hero of the story, the character of the story that's against the whole world. So I mean that our world is so not perfect. It's so dark, it's so shade maybe, that hero is closer, the hero closer to us, to regular people, and this character try to change this imperfect world. So that's I'd like to say. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Can I just ask a question? Don't you think that, well, there are some other subgenres that we can see in this book? Guys, what do you think? Because for me, it's like a mixture of different genres, and not only dystopia. well, there are some other interesting things. There are a lot of monologues, you know, and there are some other things, but I think probably you can add something.
Oh, can I start just?
Yeah, sure.
I also think that this is the mixture of genres, of types, and we can call it sci-fi, science fiction. Well, and I just have to notice that Bradbury himself claimed that he only wrote one science fiction novel, Fahrenheit 451, and he didn't consider himself a science fiction writer. He told that he is the fantasy writer, and this is different things. And we can also say that Fahrenheit 451 is a kind of psychological novel, because we can see the development of the characters, of the only character, I can say, and to see his thoughts, I can say, well, to see his thoughts, his development, his improvement maybe in character.
Yes, there's definitely this this idea of self-realization of Montag, the main character, is a central theme of this book, and I would call this a dystopian novel. The words that came to my head were also a cautionary tale, and so a cautionary tale is a depiction that shows how things might be, how things might turn out in the future, unless you change the way you are acting now. And so it's fascinating to me. I'll touch briefly on one of the main themes that I see, and we can perhaps talk more about it later. But I read this novel 2 times in my life. The first time I read it, I was university age. I was maybe 19 years old, and then I just read it again recently, which is many years later after that. And when I first read it, to me the main theme was this idea of censorship and government trying to censor what people can read. And so of course, you know, I was a young man and wanting to, you know, I was very offended by, you know, anyone that would want to control what I would have access to and to read, and so the government shouldn't do that, and you know, that's what I took away from it. And now, reading it now, and especially not just because of my age and my own years that have been passed, but the way I have seen society change since the first time I read this, I really see the theme, this cautionary tale of people disconnecting from life and people finding themselves very busy, but busy with things that are, I would call, intellectual junk food. So things that don't make you think, or things that don't challenge you. And so, you know, people watching reality TV or just looking at memes on their iPhone and just spending a lot of time distracting themselves with things, but not really interacting with each other on a meaningful level. And, you know, people all watch similar things, but things that have very little intellectual value. And so the fact that this was written at a time when in the United States, you know, by 1953, maybe only half of American households had a television set. And so when Ray Bradbury was writing this, television itself was not dominant within American culture yet, but yet he is already at that time foreseeing a time where people will have complete walls in their home that are essentially a television that they will be able to watch and even interact with. And so he's very prescient in that sense to me, that he sees little elements already within American society that he finds disturbing, and that he worries about what might happen if people take it too far.
Dana.
Okay, so thank you. I also want to share you with my experience, and I want to connect my answer with my quotation. So it was a pleasure. It was a pleasure to burn, part 1. So the first letters. And I chose that quotation because it is really close to me, because when I read this book again 2 times in my life, and the first was when I was 15 years old, and that was my real serious book, and it's changed my life totally. And then I started to read a lot of books, serious books, not just teenage novels, and I'm just not interested in it. And also I didn't like to read before this book because of school literature, and I remember that I dreamed to burn school books, which was forced to read, and this is probably why I'm not interested in Russian books. I'm very sorry, but whatever. And this quotation always reminds me of this book, this very book, and because I remember the times when I really dreamed of burning books, looking at burning pages of hellish torment of school children. And but now when I read this book the second time, these thoughts gave me like goosebumps, you know, because I really like to read books, and I really appreciate these priceless treasures in it. And I just can't imagine like burning all my collection, which I have now. And because a lot of people just don't understand me, because again, I want to connect it, like my answer with my theme topic, which I given. It is nowadays really strange to read when a lot of people are around. Just imagine when you're sitting maybe at the bus or somewhere on the bench and reading like book, and a lot of people just with phones and headphones and Apple Watch and cameras, they just didn't understand why are you bought this paper, and it is like just trash. After reading, you just need to burn it, or to, I don't know what to do, and they just ask it all the time, why are you doing such things? And well, I can't explain, because so yeah, I'm just answering. You just need to love reading or not, and don't ask me then. And well, personally, I don't feel any discomfort and any like weirdness when I reading around, when people around, and I just proud of my reading, and that's all. Yeah. Thank you.
Good. Thank you. You should be proud of reading. That's a good thing. And encourage others to do so. That's a good thing too. Okay. before, next I'd like to start to talk about some of the characters in the book, but before we move on from the theme of dystopia, let me just ask if you can think of any other dystopian books that you could name.
1984, sorry.
A lot of modern novels are dystopian because it is very popular genre of literature now, and there are many subgenres, some subkinds of literature too. For example, dystopia could be a kind of science fiction, it could be a kind of alternative history, it could be kind of different kind of history, because now there are a lot of modern books. As Dana said, it's not so modern. It also could be, let me remember, Isaac Asimov books. There are a lot of dystopias too, and there are a lot of not only books, and also a lot of stories, short stories, a lot of articles in newspapers. I saw such types, and this is really interesting to read these stories because they are so unusual, and they are so different from our real life, and they help us to understand what could be if we do not do some things, or we do some things. It's interesting, I think.
And so the book 1984 was mentioned, and do you know what book heavily influenced George Orwell for writing 1984, what he borrowed from? It was a book written probably maybe 20 years before 1984, but not published in the country it was written in.
Guys, do you remember the Zamyatins? We?
Yeah, We by Evgeny Zamyatin. And if you read Мы and then you read 1984, you will see themes that George Orwell took almost directly from Zamyatin. So very influenced.
Natalie?
I have some words about We, the novel We, because my school teacher of literature told me that you can read We when you will be the age of 30 or 25, because now you know the history of our country, you know the history of USSR, and you know what is the kind of world it is. But when you are not studying it at school, then you're not learning the history of our country, you forget about that, and you have a fresh look of this novel, because you understand what it is, but you can't believe that this person don't see the USSR, don't see these ideas in real life, don't see these changes in real life, and how he writes it. It is really unusual, and it is really strange, and it has really good thoughts for you. It is a really good experience for you to read how a person can predict how the world will be changed. Maybe it's kind of, maybe it's in your emotions about this genre.
I see your hand up, Katarina.
Yes, you mentioned the fact that dystopia became very popular nowadays, just within 20th and 21st century. I think it has something to do with the fact that people just become conscious of what we are doing and what can happen to us and to the world in whole. That's just my guess.
I think so too. And another book, I'll just mention a couple other books quickly. Another book that is often mentioned along with 1984, similar time frame in when it was written, was a book by a man named Aldous Huxley called Brave New World. And then in more modern times, popular books that turned into movies are The Hunger Games. Those are are definitely dystopian in nature. Thank you. Let's move on. Let's start to talk about some of the characters in the book. So the main character, the protagonist, is Guy Montag. I'm going to save him for a minute, and I'd like to start with another character who appears very early in the book, and that's the character of Clarice. Who'd like to give me a description of the character of Clarice McClellan?
Sasha.
Yes. I like the character of Clarice, and when I read the book, I didn't like that she didn't appear after the first meeting with Montag. That they didn't continue their story. Maybe there would be some romantic story with them, but it didn't happen. And about her, when they met and he asked, "How old are you?" she said, "I am 17 and I'm insane," because my uncle said to me that if somebody asks you, say just 17 and insane, it's completely the same. So it was very funny. And she's very curious. She looks around all the time. She very curious about things and people. She looks at people and see them and try to understand what they think about, what people are they like, not just the objects that don't have soul and something. And she asks Montag some questions to understand him better. So, and it is unusual for Montag as an ordinary person at that moment that she's so curious. It's strange and it is dangerous that she's so curious. She wants to know. And I think that she is quite intelligent. I think that her family, because her family is the same as her, they are insane for this world too, because they talk a lot, and I think they read books also, but she was clever enough not to tell him about it. So she was clever but not very cautious, because she shared her opinions, I think not only to Montag but to other people that were more dangerous for her and her family. That's why. That's all.
Well, probably she just didn't care. She didn't know fear in this way. Otherwise, it would have been senseless to live a life most people lived in that society. Yes, Christina, I think, wanted to...
Yes, I want to add one thing, that in this text, in this book, there are a lot of antitheses. And for example, juxtapositions of light and darkness. And I want to compare Clarice with light. She was like a light in this world, in this dark world, and with her own worldview, with her own thoughts, different thoughts. And I guess she was like not from this world. She's like some monster in other size, I guess.
Dana.
Well, I think it is a typical romantic character in a book. It is typical girl, teenage girl, which are sympathized by adult men, and typical teenager girl can change everything in man's mind, brain, just because she is so free. She's very light person. She's so easy like to understand a character. Her character is so like, I don't know, easy. And it is very, that's why Montag sympathized her, and he changed his mind. He tried to realize in what kind of world he lived now, what happens. And without her, I think that this book can't be without her, because he changed everything, and from her started like this book. Maybe that's my opinion. And the strange thing, I agree with Christina. Everything in this book is like in a opposition, and total opposition to Clarissa, is Mildred. And I really don't understand why Montag had such wife, but whatever. And the most interesting thing for me, why women in this story disappeared. Why? Like, I think, in my opinion, the first character, younger woman, like Clarice, should stay with Montag, and then maybe like another story, but I don't know why they are disappeared. Maybe someone had thoughts.
Natalie, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, I have thoughts about that. Clarice is a kind of soul of the Montag, because they are so close to each other, and she filled Montag's life, because he lived without the books and he don't understand what is life, what the life is. That's why I think that it's a kind of a soul of the main character. Maybe something.
But was he without books? I think he, by that time, he had quite plenty of books at home, hidden. Remember?
Yeah.
If I'm not.
Behind the ventilator grill.
Yeah. I think Kate was going to add something. Yeah.
Yes, you may be tired of my remarks, but nevertheless. Well, if you recall this scene with Dandelion, so it showed that Clarice was in love, and I think she was in love with life and with books. And as Ray Bрэdberi told himself, Clarice is Ray Bрэdberi. He said it in his interview, and both she and he are just teachers that inspire, that love life. And it can sound a bit strange, but Clarice is Ray Bрэdberi.
Interesting. I think that to me, Clarice is someone that lives totally in the present, and she lives in a state of mindfulness. And so she sees everything, and she thinks about everything. And I read a story about an interview with Ray Bрэdberi where they asked him about some of the film versions that had been made of this book. And in one of the film versions, Clarice appears. She's a bigger part, and she appears at the end of the film as a school teacher. She's a little bit older, but she's a school teacher and sees Montag again. And Ray Bрэdberi liked that very much. And so I admit I was very surprised that she disappeared so quickly from the book and was not seen again. She is the impetus, the catalyst, I think, to speed the change and the self-realization in Montag. But she has already noticed that something is different about Montag. And so it raises the question in my mind. Montag goes through this change and this realization. but could that happen for everyone in this society? Or are there people in this society that are beyond reach, beyond hope, that they would not have the same self-realization that Montag had? What do you think?
Well, I have just thought, well, firemen still had a lot of work. Despite the fact that, well, it seemed that the majority of people, most of the members of the society were like Mildred, like listening and watching to the, well, TV walls and stuff like that, but still firemen had a lot of work, which means that there were, well, quite a lot of people hiding those books. Right, well.
Yeah, good thought.
Yeah, and Sasha wanted to add something.
So, and in the book, Montag finds people that are also interested in book and that realize themselves as people that don't want to be, under this system of intelligence. I don't remember. And as you said, there were a lot of work a day, and he always goes to some house, and once he even comes to his house, and like it shows that there are people that try to read and hide books, but the system is so rough that they see everything. They're like in 1952, their eyes everywhere and Big Brother's watching you, and it's maybe there would be more people if it wasn't so dangerous, if you couldn't go to jail at the moment or be killed. So there are only the strongest people that still love books, and that didn't leave this as too dangerous.
And we get an indication that this is a difficult society to live in, and some indications we have of that are when Mildred takes all of the sleeping pills, and the two men come to her house to treat her. They're not even doctors, they're just technicians, and they comment on how common this is. And so, they get 8-9 calls a night, people attempting suicide. So even if people aren't aware of why they feel this way, there's obviously something going on that is making people want to leave their existence, because society has become not a pleasant place to live. And back to the character of Clarice, I think there's an important kind of speech or part of the talk from her where she's explaining when she's called antisocial. She said, they call me antisocial. And she says, well, it just depends on what your meaning of social is. And then she describes what the society is currently like. And so why do you think they call her antisocial?
Because she is individual, and social, and the society should be like, as the main man in the fire station said, that everybody should be the same. So there should be no difference. And she is different, and that's why she is out of the society. She shouldn't be there.
Exactly.
I just have a quote. When she says that she visits a psychiatrist, and she says, he says, I'm a regular onion. I keep him busy peeling away the layers. Well, she's like ironic about well, his duties, and she's still a mystery for this person, for the psychiatrist. He can't understand what's wrong with her because he thinks that she's ill, but probably it's just vice versa.
And she says she just makes things up to tell him.
Right, yeah.
And they call her antisocial, and yet she is a person that loves to talk to people and loves to meet with people and discuss things. So from our perspective, we would say she's a very social person, but they deem she's antisocial because she doesn't do what everyone else does. And so she's criticized for that. And she says, well, people don't talk about anything. They all say the same things. And again, I think that's that cautionary tale of what the danger of what's called groupthink, where people start to all think the same things. And so let's just briefly. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. Dana.
So I also want to add some quotation, but it is from Dostoevsky's thoughts that happiness inequality, but I don't think so. But in this book, we had some similars. The idea of government in Fahrenheit 501 is you should be equal to others to be happy, or you just bad.
Great. Let's go on talking about some more characters. I see we've already been at it for an hour, so I want to make sure we can get to as much as we can. Let's contrast two of the characters that have significant things to say to Montag, and that's the character of Beatty, who is the chief of the firemen, and Faber, who is the intellectual that he meets. How would you compare these two characters? How are they in some ways alike and in a lot of ways different?
So here are three quotes that you have picked up. They are by Faber, Beatty, and Montag. Julia, was it your choice?
Yes, it was my choice, and I'd like to discuss it. Well, let's start with the first quote, Faber's dictum. It's about commitment to the idea and ability to cope with difficulties, because Faber and Montag, they are willing to lose their lives in order to save books. They are full of passion, and this is amazing. And if we, when we see the quote of Beatty, we can talk about irresponsibility of people. They can't cope with difficulties. And we can see another really deep thought that the destruction is always easier than the creation, but people should create something new to make the world better. We shouldn't ruin the world by our own heads. So that was my thought.
There's one bit that, to me, one of the most enlightening or important expositions in the book is when Beatty comes to Montag's house and he sits and he talks to him and he gives the history and explains how things got to be this way. And at one point he says, it didn't come from the government down. There was no dictum, no declaration, no censorship to start with. No. Technology, mass exploitation, and minority pressure carried the trick. So that's interesting that it didn't start with the government deciding it needed to suppress information. It came from the people themselves that started this process.
Yeah, and it's interesting how he comments on the minority pressure, saying that, well, that's actually what you, Douglas, started with when you talked about anti-intellectualism and stuff like that. That's very important and, again, very urgent today. So people who look smart can be looked down and mocked at. And as Dana said, well, a person with a book, a paperback, is an alien. Well, so different minorities start to find fault and like flaws in the books. They start to see what is probably not there, and as a result, the books are getting censored, and then the books like cease to exist because one minority decides that this paragraph offends them, and so it is cut out. Then another group of people think that it's offensive for them, and then again this part is cut out, and then the book just ceases to exist. It stops to exist. And well, the books are like eaten, they're like burnt virtually. Well, and it's a very interesting thing that he just showed this process. It's a deep psychological observation, I think. Very important. Right, Kate?
Yes, I wanted to add that people just wanted to entertain themselves, and it's much easier to watch TV in their parlors, and just they don't required to think. They are not required to think, and as a rule, they can't think at all. We can see it with these pills, sleeping pills, and there are many other examples. So and this is again a warning for us, the message to read, or we can see the result.
Well, I have a quote at hand about this equality and inequality. Again, Betty says, "We must all be alike, not everyone born free and equal, as the Constitution says, but everyone made equal, each man the image of every other. Then all are happy, for there are no mountains to make them cower, to judge themselves against." So not created equal, but made equal, also quite symbolic. Somebody makes somebody equal, which is not natural.
Right.
Yeah. Sasha?
No, it's just interesting that in all dystopia books that I've read, they all start with the idea of communism and that everybody should be equal, and it always leads to something horrible. So that the idea of communism destroys everything. I think it's interesting.
May I have also a short remark? Why people can't be equally smart? Why should they be equally, common? Well, why can't we just try to be a little bit better and not worse? Why is it also the reverse order? Yes, I think Dana had something to say, and then Christina.
I think that Betty, it is like a character who had who has go through all of this stuff. That's why he came to Montag's house and tried to explain what he need to do, because he just he knows everything about books. He fights with them. He hates them. And he knows the value of everything, and then he knows nothing. And I had such feeling that he waiting to be killed. There are some things, some letters lines, when I try to feel, he just ironically trying to give up, trying to like, okay, kill me, just whatever. Well, and that's it.
Christina?
Yes, I want to say that the position when society degrades is very comfortable for government, and because it can manipulate all of us, all people. If people are stupid, maybe a little bit, yes. And let's step back to comparison of three characters. I want to compare it with the zombie apocalypse. It's crazy, but for example, Beatty, he's zombie at all, like a zombie, and Montag, he's in the middle of this process. He's a normal person inside himself, but society makes him to be like a zombie, and I can say like he's in the process of becoming zombie.
Kate, Anna.
May I start?
Okay.
Okay, so Ray Bradbury described this novel that as a commentary of how mass media reduces interest in reading literature. But okay, that's back to the 21st century and a bit paraphrase it. So I would say how marketing sales reduces interest in reading literature. So you know that the 21st century is the era of upgrades, I would say. And for example, as Dana have already said, people buy new iPhones with, common features without thinking why they need it, why they replace the previous one to another. So, and probably someone wants to make us, stupid customers. And we can see it in the novel as a bright picture of it.
Anne, were you going to say something?
Mm-hmm. Well, I absolutely agree with all opinions that tell us about all negative consequences connected with technology. And Ray Bradbury foresaw many such consequences. Some people are not able to communicate productively in the novel, and nowadays some people still have some difficulties with communication. So I was really impressed when I faced such a character as Clarice, because her words wasn't idle chatter. So her words were full of sense. And by the way, she was labeled by Beatty as time bomb. But I also thought, wasn't Beatty bomb himself? Why did he label her in this way? Because she was trying to keep this inner world inside herself, in her memory, the world that existed some time ago with relatives, with a live communication, with emotions and true feelings. But Beatty keeps in his memory a lot of quotations from the books he burned. Isn't it ironically that he burns all the books, but these words, so they don't disappear, they imprint into his memory. And his image is contradictory to some degree, because on the one hand, he's against the books, but from the other hand, he all the time quotes the Bible. And so it was my first experience of reading such kind of book. such genre, and I thought he was going to be a positive character, and he would be on the side of Montag, but he turned out to be not, unfortunately. But still, this is very contradictory, I think.
Kate and then Dana. Kate?
Just a little philosophical digression. I just wanted to reply your question, Anna Vasilyevna, about why can't people be equally smart? They can't be equally smart. They can be equally stupid and silly, but they can't be equally smart, because all people, every person is an individual, and we have our own possibilities, our own abilities, and so on, and we can go to the bottom. Just we can be awfully silly and stupid, but some characters just are featured with emotions and they can't think logically, for example. So they can't be equally smart. They can just be eager to know something new, but they can't be equally smart. And of course, stupid people are very convenient for the government, but in the case of Fahrenheit 451, the people made it themselves.
Dana?
Well, sorry. I also wanted to add that, like, from real Ray Bradbury's words, he always hates iPhones and smart technologies, because he said that this is a totally waste of intellect and nonsense instead of conquering space. So, yeah, great.
Great. Two points I would make. One is, I'll just touch briefly on what Kate said. I thought the same thing about, you know, whether people can be equally smart or not. And the analogy, I often think in analogies. You know, we hear the expression, the nail that sticks up gets the hammer, and so, you know, you're bringing people down to one level. But if you had different length of nails and you tried to bring them all up to the same level, some nails might be too short and they come loose. And so that's the analogy that comes into my head. But regarding the character of Beatty, my perspective is, I think Beatty is an intellectual. And I think the words he is saying are words that he doesn't truly believe. I think it's words that make it easy to justify how things are. And I think he's saying them because he has made the decision to cooperate with the government in carrying out these activities. But because he is an intellectual, he ends up hating himself inside because he knows truly that it's not right. And that's why it becomes clear to Montag that Beatty wants to die. When he confronts him and Montag realizes when he's pointing the salamander at him, Beatty wants to die. He's not going to resist it.
So I totally agree with you. And also, I think that maybe Beatty just so tired to live like this, like to agree with the government, but truly in his heart know that everything is not in that way. And that's why it is so exhaustedly live like this, like pretending, then going home and just, oh, it's very hard, I want to die, heal me. Yeah.
And Faber, who is also an intellectual, has a different relation to the government and society. And his relation was to essentially hide himself and to withdraw completely. So whereas Beatty is an intellectual who decided he would just go along with the government and play a role, Faber couldn't do that. He was not comfortable with doing that, but yet he went into hiding, and so didn't really actively speak out against the government until, you know, we see he does help Montag, and in the end he realizes he needs to do something. And so, yeah, go ahead, Donna.
I'm sorry. Well, I again totally agree with you, and also I think Faber, he is like more intellectual than Beatty, because he didn't pretend. He go against the government. He had such thoughts, but he afraid of the government. But he didn't like hide his thoughts and his impression. Yeah, that's why he's like intellectual kind of person.
Like intelligentsia, something like that.
Yeah, Faber really strikes me as the intelligentsia kind of archetype of character.
Not because he's professor, yes.
Well, because of this as well. It's like a style of life. It's not only the post, yeah. It's a lifestyle.
Someone who values that knowledge and wants to learn that knowledge and wants to compare new knowledge against existing knowledge and preserve knowledge that is been thought about and discussed and deemed to be valuable, and wants that to be carried over into the future. And so how do they end up preserving knowledge that has been burned in the books?
How they preserve books?
So towards the end
they
of the
learn
book,
them by heart to. They learn them by heart to become speaking books that maintain this knowledge in themselves.
And so one question I will ask you, and you don't have to answer it now because it might be a question that will take a lot of thought, but if you have an idea now, feel free to speak up. So if it was up to you to preserve knowledge for the future generation, and you had to memorize a book or even a piece of a book, what would you choose? And so that's something you can think about.
And Kate has an answer.
Yes, go ahead.
Well, I would choose to preserve books, or at least one book, because it's a big risk, but I can't remember every word, every preposition, and so on. And this is very important because it's the author style. Well, I think it should be preserved in the original vision, in the original variant.
And can I just remind an interesting fact from literature? Well, like if we come back to Shakespeare's times, there were no books of plays. They were not published. And so, plays were actually memorized by the actors, and that's how they got published eventually. So they were just memorizing them. Some of the actors were stealing those books when they were trying to memorize them. And well, that's how different versions came to exist, and a lot of debate about that. But I just see this funny analogy. So people were trying to memorize books, if not big, but still.
Yes,
I think just an interesting fact.
That's how knowledge was passed down, and it makes you wonder: have we lost? Have we as humans lost the ability to memorize such lengthy pieces? If you were, having to recite or sing a builina that lasted for 2 or 3 hours, would you be able to memorize that now and recite or sing that?
Yeah, Dana.
Okay, so I want to answer your question. Well, I decided to, like, I didn't find such a book which can cover every problems in the world, which can consist through problems of parents and children till government, philosophy, psychology, and a lot of topics in one book. I don't know, maybe Bible, but no. Well, that's why I don't choose any book, but I want to say that the book will last everywhere, every time, but in a different shapes. Maybe someday it will be like e-books, then maybe stories or songs or role plays, but it is books. And then in each new generation we find at least a few people or one person with the ability to remember. Yeah, that's it.
Great, thank you.
And Kate, I think Kate and Sasha then, yeah.
No, I wanted to say about Donna's, words. She said that, I don't remember exactly, but I thought that people write actually about the same things that we see every day, and maybe it is in different times, but books, they tell about same things, like family relationships, love, politics, ecological problems, I don't know. So we can like range books on the topics, but in one topic there will be the same idea, actually, or it's a bit different, but the theme like have I don't know, main statements that are important, and author usually wants to convey some specific idea that also was in another books, but it is conveyed by another story. So, and we maybe, if there will be such situation that books will be in danger, maybe we can arrange the books on the topics and maintain the best of the topic that will convey some important idea to other generations. So there can be, I think, one book that can be, but that should be saved, because, as Donna said, no book can't convey every single important topic in people's life.
And Natalie?
For me, the books is a kind of emotion, is a kind of feeling, because when you read it, you feel something that attach your attention. And if we are trying to remember the history of our country, of our literature, the important part of Russian folklore was oral folklore. It's changing the information, changing the songs, changing the tales. That's why I think that it's possible to remember the books, not only the plot of the book itself or the topic or stylistic devices different. It is important to feel the book, because when you feel the book, you understand what the author wants to say, why he choose these stylistic devices, why he choose this topic, why he choose these characters. That's why it is important to catch the idea of the feeling of the book. That's why the oral presentation of book is important too, because you can't remember the story if you don't like this story, you know. That's all that I can say.
Yes, and the oral presentation can be adapted to your audience.
So, according to the idea of Räya Bрэdberi, to preserve some books means to become a book, to become a source of ideas that are got by other people, by the audience. And it's a great responsibility. I thought about a lot of books, including some novels by Daphne du Maurier, but I would never preserve her books like Rebecca or Cousin Rachel, because in these novels, in my opinion, some mysterious female nature is considered, and that's not really what I'd like to tell others. And I'd like to preserve not the book, not the novel, but the story by O. Henry, The Gifts of the Magi, because for me that's the storehouse of unique ideas, and people should always remember about the main things in life, not to be selfish, to be ready to help other people, to do something for the sake of others, for the sake of beloved, because people should always remain people. And these are values that shouldn't be lost through the space, through the years, because so however we try, some valuable things are forgotten and priorities change. That's all.
Kate?
I just want to reply almost all of you. Well, concerning Russian folklore, the key word is changing the story, and of course you become a source of ideas, but it will be your ideas, because something has surely changed. And as for different topics, and let's take just one book, well, how will you choose between Dostoevsky, Chekhov, and so on? You can't choose. This is classic, and you can't remember each book, each word, and so on. And okay, let's take the Bible and change something. It will be not the Bible. And judging from my experience, well, last year in Anna Vasilyevna classes, we just learned some texts by heart. And I think that I have a good memory, quite modest, I know, but it was very difficult, and I managed to learn about just 3 or 4 pages, and this is very difficult. And again, we take the Bible, and how many pages are there? A lot of. And I don't believe that they managed to learn by heart each word.
That's an excellent point.
Christina?
Yes, I would like to say about the book I would learn by heart. It would be The Mist by Stephen King. It's my favorite author, and there is some mysticism there, but the main idea is solving problems in unpredictable situations. Because it's very important to think before you do something. And in this book, there are a lot of explanation of this theme and a lot of situations. And I guess for future generations, very important and it saves them from making mistakes in their life, I guess. Yes, and my choice is like that.
Great, thank you. Anyone else have any? Yes, I agree that with two things I just want to comment on as far as memorizing the Bible, and if you don't recite it back, or if you change the words, it's not the Bible. I would say the same thing for the Shakespeare example, that in the early days when plays were memorized and people would pass them on in that way, that was the standard practice. And now, after so many hundreds of years, Shakespeare is like the Bible, in that if you change a word now of Shakespeare, people will know, and they will say, no, that's not Shakespeare. And in my younger days, I used to do some theater, and if you're doing a modern play and people are not familiar with it, if you forget your lines while you're on stage, you can maybe improvise a little bit to get yourself out of the scene. But if you're doing a play in Shakespeare and you forget your lines, first of all, it's very hard to improvise Shakespeare in English. And second of all, there will be people in the audience who will know that play as better than you and will know if you're not saying the exact words. And so the other thing I want to agree with was the point that you can't just have one subject or one thing, that you really need to have a balance. And maybe it's because I'm a Libra and I always like everything in balance, but I think you need to have the balance. And so it's important to have scientific knowledge, but you need to have the moral philosophy as well, so that the people who are the moral philosophers can help the scientists understand how and when scientific knowledge should be used so that it can be used correctly. So how much more time do we have? Вы такие прекрасные собеседники, I could talk with you all day, but
If you are eager to comment on any of the quotes, you're welcome. I can share the screen.
Last night I thought about all the kerosene I've used in the past 10 years, and I thought about books. This is quotation of Montag, and for the first time I realized a man was behind each of the books. So for me this quotation is special, because it sounds like autobiography, because Bradbury said once that reading a book, everybody tries the image of the author, tries it on, his skin, as views the reality described by the author. And surely every book is related to the author's personality, undoubtedly. And all books are someone's children. They are born and they never die. They remain in people's minds. So it touches us, it evokes some emotions. And so burning the books, firemen killed someone's unique point of view, absolutely different and then extremely dangerous for society. I also think, so for me it was a complete shock to realize that firemen start the fire, don't fight it, but start. It was kind of absurd. How could it be so? And well, it was quite funny to observe how the process was working. Well, some books were found, some message was sent to fire station, and so fireman's staff was large, a lot of people were there, but operation was really fast. why so many people for such little operation, such meaningless and easy to do, to perform? So, and also, I really liked the fact that that was connected with the title of the book. So I've just remembered it, that Bradbury himself called the fire station and asked about the temperature paper was burnt, and it was 4:51. Just considered it necessary to notice. So thank you.
Okay.
One little piece of obscure history I will tell you. In the official fireman manual or history that he reads, they talk about how, you know, the first firemen were started in 1790. The first fireman was Ben Franklin, and that's a perversion of actual history, because Benjamin Franklin, who's very well known in American history, actually did organize one of the first officially organized volunteer fire companies in the United States in 1736, not 1790, because he died in 1790. But so that was another element of taking a bit of actual history and twisting it.
Yeah. And well, let's hope that the times of Inquisition and the Middle Ages and the times of the Nazi Germany will never again repeat in our history, and that books, be them paperbacks or electronic books, but the books that are full of ideas, let them go on, let them appear. And well, it's great if just the new writers and new generations, well, full of talented people, will go on this wonderful tradition, because again, it is again Ray Bradbury's idea, and well, like the main probably line that so our civilization is nothing without books. And I think probably that will be the proper moment to quote the last lines of this classic text. Natasha, you're welcome.
Okay. Montauk felt the slow stir of words, the slow simmer, and when it came to his turn, what could he say? What could he offer on a day like this, to make the trip a little easier? To everything there is a season, yes, a time to break down and a time to build up, yes, a time to keep silence and a time to speak, yes, all that. But what else? What else? Something, something. On either side of the river was there a tree of life, which bare 12 manner of fruits and yielded her fruit every month. And the leaves of the tree were for healing of the nations. Yes, the Montauk, that's the one I'll see for noon, when we reach the city. That's all.
Thank you.
It seems so right to finish with the lines from the Bible still, the book of books. Thank you very much, Douglas, for conducting this session, this discussion. Thank you very much for sharing, well, the information like firsthand. It is really valuable for us, and I think this video will be a very good material for the future generations of book lovers, especially those who are going to have their American literature classes next year. And these people are among us. Yes.
Very good.
Thank you.
Well,
Thank you very much.
I've really enjoyed being your guest today. Thank you for having me, and I hope perhaps I can do it again in the future.
Thank you, everybody, for participating in the discussion. It was very interesting.